TradeStation Crypto is an online broker-dealer that allows users to trade stocks and futures, options, and also crypto. And with me is James Pooter, who is the Vice President of Product Strategy at TradeStation Crypto. So James, great to have you.
Jane, thanks for having me.
So can we just start with TradeStation? Because I've heard of TradeStation for decades. When did TradeStation get into crypto and why?
So we got involved in crypto, I want to say, internally around 2015. We started mining. We built up a pretty sizable mining operation in-house, built an employee program. Then we came out with our trading business in 2019. So it took us that long just to build up our own knowledge to figure out actually what this asset class was.
Yeah, well, and that's been quite an interesting time to be in crypto. There's been a lot of things. So, and it seems like Bitcoin and Ethereum are getting more kind of legitimate in the public's eyes lately. We've got the ETF that just came out, and there's more in the pipeline. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think that it's becoming more adopted, more widely known. I mean, most people, if you've ever heard of crypto, you've heard of Bitcoin, Ethereum. I think the ETF futures product was a big step towards, let's say, stamp of approval, if you can say that, by the SEC. It was really a nice support that this is starting to evolve into something that needs to branch out. For a long time, the spot markets have been the only way you could get exposure to Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other assets. You have Grayscale, which is that closed-ended trust, which is an interesting product, a little bit different than an ETF. And the ETF really unlocks access to a lot of capital. I think it's about $10 trillion of advisor money that's on the sidelines that can't get into crypto. And with ETFs, it opens up some of those potential avenues.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. And you're certainly hearing a lot of institutional groups, banks, and their customers are asking for this exposure. I mean, when you've got gains like what you're seeing, people want to be a part of that. I mean, and speaking of that, so we're at this moment, November 1st, talking about crypto right around 62, Bitcoin right around 62,000. Is there a price you're looking at where, it might stabilize, or is there a key price and why?
It's hard to put a actual dollar figure on it. What I tend to look at is the overall market cap. When you look at Bitcoin, this is a great example. It took us roughly 10 years to get to 1 trillion. It took us a year to get to 2 trillion. So the larger that pool becomes, the more stable the market will become. And what happens is that the pool is small. You can't get a lot of players in there. So you have a lot of retail people, maybe mid-sized funds. As the pool expands, you get more committed capital that isn't as able to move in and out as frequently. And that's where you start to see some price stability. I think really what has to happen is there's still a lot of demand. And until we work through all the people that would like exposure, it's going to be volatile as we add new products, remove products. Once we work through that initial burst of most people that have exposure have it, then we should see some price stability. It was interesting you mentioned the banks, because I think these guys are really getting pressure from their customers, not only just to hold it, but there's a lot of discussion around how do I take trade settlement in this assets. I no longer want to, I might not want to go back into dollars after my trade. I might want to go back into Bitcoin or some other digital asset. And so some of the big custody banks are really trying to figure out, how do we support that business if our customers want a more real-time digital asset type settlement of my trades?
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So, and of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, you've got, all these other coins out there. One I saw, the Shiba Inu coin was up 8 million% from like 0.00000 to 0.000 something. So, I mean, how do you see this all kind of shaking out? I mean, will some of these coins just go away, and we'll do global transactions in Bitcoin and Ethereum? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
I always say I'm an unintentional Bitcoin maximalist, only because I don't have enough attention to look out to all these other coins. I do think there's some great, interesting projects out there. I tend to think that we're going to have a lot of these long tail, farther on the risk assets. I think most of them are going to collapse, primarily because this is typically what you see venture capital investing do, is going out to really find out these projects, go and do tests and see if they can become something. And now we're doing that with a lot of retail capital and individual investors. And it's risky, and you should really absolutely know what you're going into. I do think you're going to see the likes of Bitcoin, Ethereum as still being the primary dominant players, with different level two things coming on top of it. Bitcoin Taproot is kind of interesting, where they're going to put on some layer 2 technology that can bring in smart contracts, reduce payments. Ethereum has some challenges too, where they have their product is still difficult to use or costly from a transaction perspective. So the more layer 2 type functionality they can layer in, the better it's going to become to actually use it. Now, outside of those two big ones, I really like anything that is a potential side hustle. I think that you saw big adoptions in Uber, Airbnb, Lyft. When there are crypto projects out there that let people sell or monetize their excess resources and build side hustles. For example, Helium is an interesting one. You put a router on your desk. It's like a $200 router, and it'll mine Helium just by sharing your internet. Filecoin is another one that's kind of interesting, that lets you share your Filecoin, lets you share your disk drive space through the token. So those things are quite interesting for me. But I'm not following so much SHIB. I know it's exciting. It's not something on my radar.
What animal coin are we going to have next is what I'm wondering. By the way, Filecoin, I'm familiar with them. So yeah, that is a very interesting use, an application for this. What do you think it will take for mass adoption?
So time, for sure. This industry has brought in some of the smartest people in the world to try to solve these various problems. We started out in a world where there was only Bitcoin. Now there's several thousand different projects. What's very interesting is that you now have a place where there's a variety of different tools you can use, whether you want to have some type of utility or some type of currency. Those types of experiments and projects are working their way through the system. As we start to evolve and become more sophisticated on these and build new businesses on top of them, that's when you're going to start to see more mainstream adoption. We're still in this main area where we're focused around trading and investing as a primary use case. As we start to get more things built on top, we're going to see a little bit wider adoption. And what I mean is, for example, Twitter is a great use case here. They're allowing you to do these micropayment type tips through Twitter. That means you can interact with Bitcoin without having to go through a lot of the hurdles that most of us who've been in crypto for a while have to deal with, like privately hosted wallets and lots of crazy passwords. So the more that those use cases get into our daily lives, like Twitter, maybe the Facebook platform or Meta that introduces it now, those things that become part of our daily life, it'll just happen eventually. And I might not have answered specifically. It's really time, and it's really more people like Twitter putting it into our daily lives for it to just become second nature.
And what about regulation? There's a lot of talk about that. Gary Gensler seems somewhat crypto friendly. What do you think of all of this?
I think it's a complex subject. As a company that's operated a broker-dealer for many years, we are very well suited for a regulated environment like a securities environment. I think for us, business-wise, it'd be phenomenal. I'm not sure how well that this would be. I want to make sure that whatever is done doesn't go into really dampening out innovation.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, good point, because it feels like there's a lot of innovation still to come in this industry as we work at it still very early. So James, thank you so much. Very interesting, this space is, and it will be, I'm sure, continue to be.
You're welcome. I really appreciate you letting me talk, and thanks for having me on. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you.